Welcome to today's episode of Expert Showcase. On the show today, we've got Barry Selby, the Heartbreak Repair Specialist. He's going to talk to you about Foggy Glasses and Iceberg and Broken Mirror. 3 keys to stop playing Russian Roulette with your romance. Hey, Barry, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Epic. It's epic to see you. I'm so much looking forward to having you on the show today, partly because as my viewers, a couple years ago I went through my own divorce, and I'm probably playing Russian roulette with my romance at this point now, so I'm quite sure that by teaching me this stuff, you're going to teach our epic viewers this stuff as well.
It'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to it. During this first segment, we're going to go through your hero's journey, and we've kind of split up into 3 areas: the beginning, the turnaround, and the aftermath. Before we dive into each of those areas, give us a quick overview of your hero's journey.
Well, I was born. No, we'll start there. Simply put, is that I didn't know what I know now when I was a kid and when I was a young adult. And so I made tons of mistakes. I finally figured out what was going on. Then made more mistakes, and now I know what to do right, if you want to put it in the more vague terminology. But that's kind of what happened, is that it was really a matter of learning, trying, failing, learning more, trying, failing, and then a few more times. But I'll tell you more detail when we get to the whole story.
Excellent, excellent. So there was a lot of trial and error.
Yes.
And it eventually succeeded. That's good. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's get to the beginning. Tell us a little bit more about the beginning and the that pre-low period that every successful person goes through.
Well, I need to go back to my childhood. I was born and raised in England, hence the strange accent you may be hearing on this call. My parents were together until my mother passed away a couple of years ago for 60 years. So I was raised in a very, very traditional family values in England. So stiff upper lip, repressed emotions, that's kind of the English archetype. And that's what I was raised with. And I didn't know that there was anything different about that. And I've got all the hindsight now to see what was off in my own learning. But when I was growing up, 2 things were going on. One is that I didn't hear my parents ever argue in front of me and my brother. So the experience I had was a perfect relationship to my eyes. And so my memory taught me that every relationship should be perfect, which meant my teens and 20s were disastrous in my dating life, because when I was going out on dates, I presumed it would be perfect and easy because it looked that easy. And so a month, 2 months ago, binary was great, but as soon as there was a discord, an argument, an upset, I would bail. I'd leave, because as far as I was aware of, this couldn't be the right one because we shouldn't be arguing. That's the rules I had in my head. And that's what I was being driven by. The other part was that I wasn't a jock or a player at school. So in my teens, I was the safe shoulder and the guy that the girls would go to when they were heartbroken because some guy screwed them up. They had an upset. They were hurt. And I was this safe space. I was that place they could come to rest, which was great in terms of I had all the women's attention, but I didn't get any benefits out of it. Just to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, I can so relate because it's man, this is where, as being an experienced host, sometimes your brain just kind of goes into left field. So, but I can so relate because it's that friend zone. I mean, and today, for what the kids would talk about today, is that friend zone. Is the fact that you end up entering this weird area where, and it sounds like during your beginning phases, you entered that area with a lot of people where you were just friends, and they never saw you as as anything else. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, was that, I should say, during your teen years and when you were a kid, did you realize you were in the friend zone, or was that something that you were cognizant of, or was it just something that, hey, I'm happy to have all these friends and it's all good? What was your thought process at that point?
To be honest, I think more than anything else, it was naivety. I didn't know necessarily. Well, first of all, I didn't know how to do anything different. So the biggest thing was I felt like I was stuck there. Like I knew that there was more because I saw the guys and girls going out romantically, kissing, having fun. I was getting none of that. So I had this feeling of missing out on what was going on. of course, looking back, I certainly see some of those patterns that they were doing that just crack me up now in hindsight. But for me, there was definitely the sense of not having what I wanted and not sure how to get out of the loop I was in.
Ah, interesting. And that I'm quite sure that in the second piece, when we actually talk about heartbreak and or I should say, Foggy Glasses, Iceberg, and Broken Mirror, and all the other stuff we're going to talk about in the second half.
Yeah.
It sounds like this would be a big part of it, because I think a lot of people go through it, and a lot of people, when they're going through their beginning with their relationship with their teens, just as you said, they kind of realize it, but they don't know how to get there.
Right.
Interesting. So while you're going through this beginning phase and not realizing, or kind of realizing but not understanding how to get there, did you, was there anything you tried? I mean, was there anything that, before you hit the bottom, before you hit that turnaround piece, was there anything that you can remember trying to do or trying not to do to try and make things better or different? Or did you just kind of exist and just kind of deal with it?
The truth is, I was really more around my school fellow peers than I was anywhere else. So it was kind of like, once I was in that routine and that rut, I was kind of stuck there till we left school. I mean, that was high school. And so until I went to college, things didn't really shift that much. And that was a place where things were different because it was a new paradigm. Suddenly I didn't have the history dragging behind me. I could start like, I'm new now, different and everything else. And I had a relationship that was really wonderful happened, but I was at a technical school in England, which is one of these schools where you work out in the corporate world in between the years. You don't do 3 years straight through, which is English education, not American. So I fell in love with somebody the last week of my first year before I went home for the 6 months. So I ended up having to do a commuting relationship from home to college, back and forward, to meet this girl that I was going out with. And we went together for a few months, and it was a great new shift, but it was still had its, looking back, the crunchy bits and the bits that didn't really work. But it was fun at the time, but eventually just didn't work out. And I didn't know why it wasn't working out, but something was off. But the truth was, I had no skills, no mastery of this. I wasn't a player. I wasn't skilled. I wasn't anywhere near the level of understanding what human relationships are like anyway than I do now. Of course, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of interesting that you say player, because, it's funny. People, our viewer, we have a very diverse viewership, a lot of Gen Xers and baby boomers, and the millennials who are watching are probably going, I'm trying to think of if they'd be thinking, what's a player? Or the kind of interesting, I guess the kind of interesting thing is when I think of a player, and I'm not sure if this is your definition at this point. Folks, this is the fun you get about seeing the multicultural aspect of Expert Showcase. We now finally have had an Englishman on. Many people from Spain and from, I've got to count the countries one of these days, but
right.
Gotta love Skype.
I know. We'll keep it on.
Yeah, we're going. But so when you say a player, when I think of a player, I think of a player that's been described, I'll say, in the 80s, 90s, and I would say 90s and 2000s and today, which is somebody who just kind of goes around and, has multiple women, that sort of thing. When you're saying a player, is that the definition you're using now from your beginning phase, or does it have a different meaning?
Truthfully, it was that kind of sense, because as a young adult, that seemed like the only other choice. Like, I didn't know how to do healthy relationships. I thought, well, they're having all the fun. They're getting together with the girls and having a great time. And I wasn't one of those. So they were the sort of the wished for ideal, which I could never get to, because they were having success and they really didn't care. And it seemed like they were getting all the girls. Again, so now I know all the backstory. Again, hindsight being 20/20.
Yeah.
I was to see what wasn't happening for them. But at least they were getting to go out on dates and having fun that I wasn't having.
Yeah, and it's amazing what happens with perception, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Where you can see on the outside things look one way. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a duck. I mean, as you being in our industry, I'm sure you've heard probably used the old saying, a duck is all calm above water, but the only way it can be that calm is this little feet
it's underneath,
spinning, or spinning 1,000 miles an hour to stay afloat,
Right. Absolutely.
So it's not necessarily what you see, but it's what you don't see.
Right.
And it's interesting because it sounds like you went through what I've experienced and what a lot of people I coach and a lot of my friends have gone through, which is they had one paradigm in school. They went off to college or technical school, and that's really where the turning point hit, where they were able to break out of their old paradigm. They started to do things differently, but they still hadn't changed their mindset, and they just thought by doing things differently, different things would happen, and they didn't realize it was a combination of everything. So it sounds to me anyway, that relationship you had at the end of your first year might have started or might have been the turning point time in your life. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it was when things opened up, because it was the first time I'd gone past that like clumsy asking out failed first date experience. Actually, we got into a relationship, which was really my first one. And it wasn't necessarily the most fulfilling on all the levels, because it's still this young, naive, exploration, clumsy, all that sort of thing. That was what happened as youngsters. I mean, I was 18 at the time, 17, 18. And it was definitely something where I knew as little as I did, so I was happy with what we were getting, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, I'm quite sure all of our female audience viewers are going, he's got a great deep voice, great smile. There's no way this guy could have been. This guy could have been single. So for all you female viewers out there, the reason I bring that up is because when you see a guy who's got a great voice and a great smile, and ask him if he's single. Kind of like your host here. But anyway, and there ends my dating
marketing. Yes.
Yeah, there ends the dating piece of this show. But no, in all seriousness, so you got in that relationship. You're in your turnaround. This is kind of where that turnaround starts to happen. Because it sounded like, I'll say, let me just ask, how did that relationship end? Was it good? Was it bad? Did you realize something? Or how did that relationship end and affect you, so to speak?
Well, the truth of the relationship is it went its course, and it really, when it ended, was we both sort of went, it wasn't working. Because the distance and other things, she was young and she was about to go away to college somewhere else entirely. So we were losing that connection. So it was, in some senses, it was unrequited or unfulfilled, because we didn't really have it play out to its full conclusion. But it truthfully was, it got to where it got to because we couldn't go any further just with our lifestyles, schedules, what we didn't know and how we were living. And also, I was starting to work more out in the world. And a couple of months later, I went to work in Germany for a couple of years. So I left the country. So lots of things changed. And that's a whole nother level of really my exploration, my understanding, and again, my own naivety and clumsiness, because I kept discovering how much I didn't know many times over.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so interesting that we're talking today about long distance in relationships, and it's kind of I've been through my own fair share, and it's always interesting to learn from them. I mean, I remember one, my first real long distance relationship. I ended it before it could go much further because I wasn't willing to do it. And the saddest part is she was a wonderful girl. At some point, maybe the audience will hear the whole story because I actually saw her years later, and it's a very interesting story. So tune into a future episode. You might hear that story. And if you're the person I'm talking about, hey, get back in touch with me. But anyway, that's besides the point. But no, but I learned a lot from that. The point of that story is I learned a lot from that and treated the future long distance relationships, differently. So during that turning point, what did you learn from? Did you learn anything about long distance relationships, or what did you learn through going through this turning point phase?
I think the best thing I learned, hindsight, looking through the lens, is I didn't know what I was looking for. I was really drifting, and it was true for a lot of my life at that time, from possibility to possibility. I wasn't really having a criteria and clarity of what I really wanted. I was just going, she's cute. And that's the way it worked. I mean, I was really driven by simplistic mindset because that's what I was raised with. Again, I didn't have education. In fact, nobody did, I think, at that time, of how to make intentional choices about relationships, about anything in life. We sort of fell into what was available.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's interesting. So if you don't mind me asking a little bit more personal, did you grow up in a small town in England by chance, or was it one of the larger?
Sort of, kind of. The town I grew up in where I was young was only a few 100,000 people in the town, but we were right next to London. So we had this big brother next to us, the big city. And I spent a lot of my time going into London a lot too. So I wasn't in a very isolated village or anything like that. So it's still a fairly big town.
Yeah, and part of the reason I asked was just the way you talked about what was presented with us, because I knew I grew up in a very small town in eastern Pennsylvania. And, it's like you go and, it's funny, when I look back, a lot of people who grew up in that town who I went to school with are married to people they went to school with because they they never, it's kind of, that was the time. I mean, you grew up in a town, if anything, you moved from one small town to the next neighboring small town, and that was, that was about it. So
that was true. That was true for me too. I mean, I said I went to work in Germany for a couple of years, and I remember, in fact, when I was in high school, one of my classmates had left school at 15, which was available at that time. And by the time we left school at 18, she already had 2 kids. It was insane. Like, she got married, like 16-year-old, first kid, second kid at 17, 18. She was, and I have no idea where she is now, but a lot of the kids I grew up with, I know were marrying their high school sweethearts and staying local. And it's eye-opening now because I live 7,000 miles away from there. So it's a different experience.
The funniest part, when they do a movie in 20 or 30 years about the 80s and the 90s, and they talk about marrying your high school sweetheart, kids are going to have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. They're going to be like, they didn't marry their best Facebook buddy? And it's like...
Whole different, yeah.
Yeah,
whole different thing now. Yeah.
Exactly. So what else, not necessarily looking through the lens, but at the time when you were going through that low point and that turning point, can you remember anything you might have realized at that point that led you to start to go in a different direction? Was there any big thing that came to you, and was it one thing, or was it just a progress of things?
I had, by the time I got, let me put in context, in my early mid-20s, I moved out to the United States, and I lived in Germany, lived in Belgium, lived in England, so I had some country experience. My worldview was opening up big time and shifting. And when it came to LA, I came on a contract that ended up becoming a permanent job. And it was probably a couple of years in, if I just got my green card, I think it was, and somebody had introduced me to one of these personal growth seminars, one of those funny things out in the world that I'd never heard of before, never a clue of before. And that was probably one of the biggest turning points because, first of all, this is funny. He and I were working in the aerospace industry at the time, this guy I knew. And it was this Thursday morning after a seminar had begun, and he came down for coffee in the morning in the cafeteria, which I met him in, and said, "You look so tired. What happened last night?" He said, "Well, I went to a seminar." And I was like, "What's a seminar?" Because I had no clue, literally no idea. And he said, basically, he went to a seminar. He'd been doing a ton of these things back in the 80s. He said, well, he basically learned some good things, met some cool people, and there were some cute women. And I said, where do I sign up? I didn't know any different. But that was. I mean, I look back and say, okay, so maybe Spirit was giving me a message, and I think it was, because I really got a sense that was the door opening, because that was the December of '84 where my life changed. Because what happened was I went to my first personal growth seminar, but truth was, it was a chance to look at my own life and see myself through a whole different lens, and it shifted my perception. And that was the beginning of my passionate journey of understanding humanity and how we are and who we are. So that was the biggest wake-up call. And it wasn't about the relationships out there. It's more the relationship in here, because that opened up everything for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting you talk about personal growth seminars is the fact that people who've never been don't get it, and people who have been do. And it's kind of like, people go, why do you spend, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on personal growth? It's like, because what you just, it's almost like you can't explain it. It's almost like you have to say, look, I will buy you a ticket to show up there, and you have to experience it for yourself. And then they either get it or they either get it or they don't. And the ones who get it, they realize what a magical experience it can be, and the ones that don't, look at you like you're I was gonna batshit crazy. That's it. Right, there you go. I was trying to think, now the FCC can't come down on me. So yeah, it's batshit crazy. Right. So you went to this personal growth seminar, and that kind of really started accelerating you into your aftermath period. Tell us a little bit.
After years, it wasn't like 2 years. It's been like a journey. At that, I think the biggest highlight for me in that first experience was sitting across from somebody who I looked upon as being like this tough guy, really got it together. He's a big muscle-bound guy, successful in business. He had this really nice leather jacket on. He drove a Porsche. I thought everything I wanted, he was modeling. And then I discovered how much he was hollow, and we had the same experiences of history. It literally brought me to tears. That was the first time I think I woke in my adult life where I actually cried out of awareness and shifting. And it was a starting point for me of reopening my heart to understanding life and people, because it brought me closer to another man, which is very, I'm a straight guy. It's like hugging other men, loving other men. No, I can't do that. That was the rule I grew up with. But to open up to have this experience, it really changed my perception, but two, my own heart, because it shifted me into a place of compassion for myself and for other people. That was the beginning of a long journey that I've been on ever since.
Yeah, that's so amazing, and that is one of the other things that people just. It's funny, 'cause just to take a quick digression. It's why I'm so glad that professional athletes are now hugging each other all the time, because what people don't realize is you can be like you and I, a straight guy, and you can still have love for somebody
Hmm.
else in a much different way, at a much, different level. And
Right.
it's so awesome, because what people don't realize is that sometimes the people, it's kind of like the old story about bullying. Sometimes the people who are toughest on the outside are the most hollow on the inside, and are just
Hmm.
begging for somebody to, to realize that, and to go ahead and change.
Right.
Um, so talk to us more about the aftermath, and now that you've got this, as you start to go through this realization, how did it change? How did it change your
Wow.
relationships, and what kind of journey was it in the aftermath?
Well, the good news and the bad news, that there was two parts of this. The good news is that I found a place where I thrived, because it really taught me more about life skills, how to be more fully me. And it wasn't so much about outside success; it was about inside alignment and really feeling more like grounded in who I was. And it started opening up my awareness to a lot of things, and it's led me to a very different place in my own life. Obviously, in my work I do, but also it. One of the challenges about being involved in the personal growth industry is that we tend to look through the lens that if somebody hasn't done it, we can't relate to them.
Uh,
It's been a challenge, and I'm much different now. But at the beginning, it's kind of the elitist experience where you haven't done the seminar. You should come do the seminar because I've done it and you haven't. And it was such an ego trip. It was ridiculous. And even though I was doing the awareness stuff, I was totally oblivious to what I wasn't doing with other people. But as the growth progressed, what I found was I was attracted to people, and particularly to women, who had also done this work, because we had a common language, and common ground is always good for a relationship. And so my dating life improved to a degree, but there was still stuff I had no clue about, and we'll talk about in the second half about the tools that I now teach, that really gave me the understanding of why I kept messing up my relationships even after that point. I was doing much better in my relationships. I have some dear friends who look back on past relationships where she and these different women, we're very close friends now, but obviously the relationship didn't work for us romantically. But the thing was, I was much more able to love, because first of all, after doing this work, my heart was so much more open to receive and give love, which is one of the biggest tools.
yeah.
I was looking for love from all the wrong places, like head, groin, everything else, not from the heart, and it messed up a lot of my choices. And so progressively, I was getting to better relationships, but there was definitely some repeated patterns and cycles that kept coming over the years. That's what really became the tools that I've learned to work with to change those, because that's the trap we fall into. We find a different person, but the same thing is happening again and again. Just different face, same pattern.
Yeah, exactly, and it's so right. I mean, you said there are so many powerful things you just said. One of them is that when you start to talk the same language as somebody,
Yeah.
I often say it's funny, because part of the stuff. I'm part of a number of different teams. I guess that's the best way to put it. And the
Hmm.
interesting thing is that, other than one very prominent guy, I think everybody I know in the personal growth industry, even the most popular and prominent people, have been divorced at least once. And if you talk to them, they came into, they had their pre-personal growth industry life, where they
Hmm.
probably got married and kind of had a vision.
Yeah.
They then got into the industry, and then they started growing apart from their significant
Yes.
other, because they weren't a part of it, and they stopped understanding the language, so to speak. But
Right.
then, once they realized that that wasn't the right person for them, and they got through their own turnaround, they realized that, because of the way things happened, there was also a boatload of women sitting in the audience that had gone through the same thing. And
Right.
now, all of a sudden, you have two people who connected at a much different level, and at least speak a common language.
Hmm.
And I know we're going to talk about this in the second half, but did you find, and the reason I tell that story is, to want to ask you this question: when you started speaking that common language with people, I know it didn't all work out, but did you find the
Right.
relationships worked out better, and it allowed you to figure other things out where relationships weren't working so well, versus just the initial, batting your heads because you weren't speaking the same language?
Absolutely. And it's funny because you mentioned that about the people coming into the seminars or into the trainings and then breaking up because they weren't aligned. In my book, I actually have one chapter that talks about exactly that point, because I learned the hard way and the right way that I call it the rubber band idea of relationships, because when people do things like personal growth or a new spiritual path or something happens in their lives where they change a lot, if one of the partners changes, it puts tension on the relationship with the other person and they get pushed apart or pulled apart. One of three things happens, and that second person either is going to jump in the same boat and learn from what they're learning or something parallel so they can get closer together, or it's going to break in a simplistic term. And that's what happened. A lot of people I knew did that, where they came in as married couples and broke up, or they came in single and got married who worked because they met somebody in the event. The challenge also is, and I'll say this clearly because I've done a lot of seminars and teachings over the years, is the seminar will not make you special. It doesn't fix you so you can find a partner in that seminar, because you're now in a myopic environment, which is a dangerous place to play because you're loving everybody who's in that room. So suddenly you're dating. I mean, this is from the guy's point of view, because there's guys in one of my teachers' languages, we're the hunters. So we're always looking for what's next. And so dating is a hunting practice, like we're sorting and finding the right one. Well, in a seminar room, we're probably scanning the room going, okay, which one's the cutest? Sorry, I'm adding all the guys on this one because it's something I know I did myself.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because as we get towards the end of this hero's journey, I'll interject a little bit of my own and just say part of the reason this resonates with me so much is because I was in corporate America before. I started off life as an entertainer, got into corporate America, and then now have been doing this and back to doing what my passion is, and which is public speaking, teaching people, motivating people, and doing videos like this, doing television shows and that sort of thing. About four and a half years ago, I dove back into the personal growth industry headlong, and I was married at the time, and over time, our marriage just did one of these because while my ex-wife was a learner, it wasn't in the same way, and it gave the appearance that I had changed. And it's interesting to go back and look at it. And it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like I said, I guess the best thing I can say without bullet, because I'm trying to. For the folks who know me right now, they know I'm trying to shut down only because I could talk for 3 hours on this. So, and this isn't about me. This is about Barry. So
I appreciate that.
All I can say is I so much identify with this, and I'm so happy that we have you on today, because in the second part we're going to get to Foggy Glasses, Iceberg, and a broken mirror. There's definitely some things it already sounds like I wish I would have had. Maybe even sooner, so to speak, than today. So I'm looking forward to getting there. Before we wrap this segment up about the hero's journey, I just want to give you 1 second. Is there any big learning or anything you wanna say, that if you had one thing to say from your hero's journey, either the beginning, the turning point, or the aftermath, what would be the first thing or the biggest thing that comes to your mind, the biggest piece of advice that you could leave people with? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I guess the bottom line is there's always a turnaround. I mean, unless you give up. But the bottom line is, like, just have faith. And that was the biggest thing for me, is that even now I'm having as much faith as I did, because, sorry, my Skype does these weird things.
Gotta have faith, man.
Bottom line is there is a turning point, and that's the thing I didn't know at the time, and I wish I'd known. It would be much easier to go through the journey knowing that there was going to be something happening that would change the direction, and that's the piece for me, is that I'm grateful I had that.
Yeah, and that is a great place to leave the Hero's Journey segment on. We're going to go ahead and take a very short break. When we come back, you definitely want to stick around, because when we come back, we're going to talk to the Heartbreak Repair Specialist that we've been talking to this whole time, Barry Selby, and we're going to hear about Foggy Glasses and Iceberg and Broken Mirror, 3 keys to stop playing Russian Roulette with romance. We'll be back in about 60 seconds, so if you want to take a quick drink or something like that, go for it, but stick around, because we'll be right back. If you're a coach and realize that being on an episode of Expert Showcase would give you the video content you need to skyrocket your coaching practice, head over to expertshowcase.com and apply to be on the show. If you're a coach, author, or speaker and realize that the power of branded video content is the thing that's going to set you apart, and we'd like to explore all the great branded vlog, webinar, and web TV show options we have, or just want to get to know us better, head over to VideoContent.Agency. Check out what we've got going on. There's a Work With Us tab at the top. Send us your information. We'll get back to you, and we'll see if we're a good fit to work together. And we're back with the expert focus segment of our episode today. We're going to ramp this up with the Heartbreak Repair Specialist, Barry Selby. We've had an incredible conversation talking about his hero's journey. If you're just watching this piece and haven't watched the first part of the episode, head back out, watch the hero's journey, get to know Barry at a deeper level, because once you do, you realize that what he's about to talk about, he speaks from personal experience, and he's the guy to help you, especially when you're looking for a heartbreak repair specialist. Because goodness knows, Barry, there's a lot of people looking for that old heartbreak repair specialist in this world today.
Indeed.
And I say that because we'll get into your topic in a second, but I think something I heard is like 50% of marriages now, or something crazy like that, end in divorce. And I just heard another statistic yesterday, which is scary. 75% of all divorces are initiated by the woman nowadays, which is, I was watching D News yesterday, and they did this whole thing on, it was kind of ironic that it came on yesterday, and we're talking today about this, because they said 75% of divorces are initiated by women, and that it actually, surprisingly enough, is worse for the man, and it takes the man longer to get over a divorce. And they say some men never get over the divorce, even when they have another partner. It was a bizarre thing to start, being divorced myself, I kind of relate, but so I know there are millions and millions of people looking for a heartbreak repair specialist. So let's dive right into it. Give us a quick, I'd say 60 to 90 second overview of what we're going to talk about. I'll give the folks 3 bullet points in a minute, but let's get in and what are we going to talk about in this segment?
Basically, the truth, you mentioned this about the divorces and about men having a long-time recovery. Being a guy, I know this, is that we as men generally have a much harder time connected to our emotions, which is why we're such a challenge. Women are generally more able to access it, which gives them the ability, not always the result, to heal more rapidly. At the same time, women have been more empowered, and I have a whole thing working about the feminine, which I'm very passionate about in my work. Women have been through the third wave of the feminist movement in the last 10, 20 years, and I can go a whole other conversation about that. They go from about the suffragettes to the sexual revolution to what's coming now. And women are seeking their own independence and freedom and fulfillment, which some relationships have stifled for them. Yeah. So a lot of women have chosen that way out because they didn't have a man who either understood, supported them, or even gave them the freedom. And that's unfortunately what's been happening because of where we come from in our evolution.
Yeah, exactly. And, kind of to further that point one little bit, part of it was funny also from that D News episode. One of the things people have to realize is that you can change your mind very quickly, but it's difficult to change your biology, and it takes a lot longer to change the biology. We might touch on that during the show, or we can talk about it afterwards. I don't want to derail your epic topic for today. So we're going to talk in this segment about foggy glasses and the fact they make it hard to see. The iceberg behind you and a broken mirror can mean more than 7 years bad luck. So let's dive right in. When you say foggy glasses make it hard to see, sounds like common sense, but what are we talking about here?
It's basically because, especially with, let me say this, with millennials especially, the dating applications on the smartphones have changed the whole marketplace for dating. And what people look for can be very myopic or very simplistic. They go, well, she's cute or he's cute, and right age, right location, let's date. And what I mean by foggy glasses is if you had a clear lens, a clear vision, you'd actually have a lot more keys you look for in a partnership than just what's convenient or what's the first 3. In my work with my clients and what I've learned myself is that it's important to have a clear picture of what you want, because as you mentioned about when you've seen people splitting up into seminars, without having common language, that's a key piece too. Do you understand each other? Do you speak the same language? Do you live in the same conversation, and can you grow together? And so for me, relationships are more than just, okay, they're cute, let's go out, because that's what drives a lot of people's thoughts about relationship, and they wonder why it doesn't work. So the foggy glasses means that we're not really looking clearly at what we're dating. We've kind of got this thing of, well, cute enough and funny enough, but you don't know about the history and their patterns and all the stuff they bring to the relationship, which is the next piece we'll talk about. All those experiences that may not fit where you want to go. So the foggy glasses is a dangerous thing, because it's important to know what you really want. And it's so tempting because of the smartphone apps and the websites and all the other things out there that you can just meet somebody cute and like, that'll work. And it won't.
Well, and it's interesting because I also heard, and I also was looking at another story, and they were talking about, basically how Tinder is changing the face of dating, and the fact that, now a lot of, millennials and even the next generation are growing up where it's becoming so commonplace. You basically look at an app, swipe through, and have multiple, whether they're actual sexual partners or just multiple partners, and not really become completely invested. It's almost kind of the ironic thing, Barry, is are we almost getting back to, and this is not Foggy Glasses, but I got to ask this, are we almost getting back to the 60s and the free love movement? I mean, is it's kind of, it's kind of oddly, I'll say similar, only with a technology twist on it.
It is easier because there's less focus and, again, less intention because, I mean, I look at relationships as being very important, but a lot of people choose, because of the other apps and things out there for dating and just having someone to play with or have sex with, the commitment level and the value is not as implanted in the relationship as it would otherwise be. So yes, like the 60s where there was low attachment and just playing, having fun, that's definitely happening with Tinder and some of the smartphone apps that are propagating that behavior, yes.
Interesting. So we've got steampunk coming back as as a way to dress and everything, and we've got the '60s. Hey, I've got the long hair, so we're going back to the days of hippies.
I've given up on that.
Hey, you're the smart one. Unlike some other people in the public eye who've been recently kind of bashed. I won't talk about who decided to not give up on the long hair and still have the horseshoe thing going on. It's like okay, gotta always wear the bandana. But anyway, so as far as Foggy Glasses go, I gotta ask you this one thing, because when I hear Foggy Glasses, when I hear what you talk about, one of the things I think of is this super holistic view where everything, including down to the base level of what type of music and what type of what type of music you like and what type of food you like. When you talk about Foggy Glasses and when you talk about what you really need to start to get to know about people, do you take it down to that, I'll call it that very what I would consider minuscule level, or do you keep it up at the core value level to say, look, here are the 10 things that I have to have in a relationship that I can't do without, and if they don't happen to like the same type of pasta sauce as I do, I'm not going to hold that against them. Where do you kind of draw that line?
I'd start with the bigger qualities. In fact, again, back to my book, I have a couple of things in there about you got to know what your deal breakers are and your must-haves. And so, yes, that's key things to have is you got to know, first of all, what it is that doesn't work for you, period. And it can be pretty serious stuff, but also what you must have in the relationship. So I have had partial, now I'm not a vegetarian, but I've dated women who have been vegetarians, and it can work and sometimes it doesn't. And I've proven it both ways. Yeah. So there are certain things where some things could look big and not, and some things that are not big can be. So it's important to have qualifications because if you happen to be someone who loves peace and quiet, but your partner loves rock and roll 24/7, that might not work. So you got to know what you really want. And the Foggy Glasses pieces for me, I start, in fact, my clients, the first week I work with them, I have to make a list of everything in their past relationships that didn't work. All those things that they didn't like, or didn't want, had to put up with, were frustrated by. And that becomes one side of the sheet. And then on the other side of the sheet, I have them write down the positives of all the things that would they become if they did have what they wanted. So then have a baseline to build from when they want to create a list and a vision of what they want to attract.
Excellent. So just to repeat, you have basically you have the I'll call it the core values, that top level that really, it's kind of like the must-haves and then the I really hope they have these, and then kind of the okay, these are not important, that these are kind of the it'd be cool to have. But if they don't, I can kind of deal with it. It's not that It's not that big of a deal.
Yes, exactly. So it's having that piece, and so it's important to have understanding of what is what seriously is important that you cannot live without, and some things that you say, you know what, I can work with that. And it's being understanding because it could be pets, it could be maybe an allergy to cats, and if your partner has a cat, and I've been there before, it was challenging to be over at her place because I'd start sneezing all the time. So there's certain things that say, this doesn't work. And it's not from a point of view that's wrong. You're just saying that's for me. So again, having those true values assigned.
And that is epic. And that's why you as a viewer, if you're going through a heartbreak or maybe on the verge of it or are dealing with it right now, you got to get in touch with Barry, because most coaches I know will sit there and not separate the multiple pieces when they talk about your next relationship. They'll sit there and say, okay, you got to have this one entire list of must-haves, and even if it's the type of music and everything else, you really need to have that down. And Barry, you sound like much more of a progressive coach that you split up into multiple areas, because realistically, there's things that, love does conquer a lot of things. And when it's the type of pasta sauce somebody likes, love should be able to conquer that. If it can't, you're in trouble. I'm going to tell you right now, if you fight over the pasta sauce, if you're watching this and you're fighting over the pasta sauce, you're in trouble, because it ain't that important. Trust me.
And it isn't about the pasta sauce.
That's the truth. It's not. It's not, and that's where a lot of people. I'm sure you deal with this all the time. A lot of people get in that mode where they start arguing and they start really being upset about the little things, and they think it's about the little things,
right?
And they don't realize that, man, if you're starting to fight over the little things, get to see somebody like Barry today, because you in big trouble. That's the
right. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, because it sounds like we're about to get into the iceberg, because I think a lot of the iceberg behind you can breed those little troubles. But I guess the last thing I want to ask you about real quick is when you're talking about Foggy Glasses, and it's just going to do a real quick answer. When you have people define that list, do you find it's difficult to try and convince them that when they go out and find the next person, that they shouldn't feel like what they've written down that list is actually bashing their ex, that all they're doing is saying, look, I've grown, and I'm not saying my ex had or didn't have any of these qualities, I'm just saying this is what I want in my life?
Well, the thing is that Foggy Glasses is where you're going, and I'll get to the other part in a minute. That if you're looking at your ex, then you're not looking where you're going. You're walking backwards. So you really got to focus on what you really do want, and it's not about them; it's about you. And that's the truth: is that your ex hopefully showed you things about yourself that you had to shift. Like, oh, I didn't choose that; that was my learning. I want to choose it this time. Thank you to my ex for that one. And literally from a place of peace.
Exactly, and that's epic. Well, it's funny, because we'll probably talk about this later. Maybe I'll have you on for a second episode. We got to get into the iceberg behind you, because it's really intriguing to me, because I haven't heard of this concept before. I kind of think from prepping the show I know what it's about, but why don't you give our audience a view of what the iceberg behind you is all about?
Sure. It's funny, because I was actually recently at a lecture by Bruce Lipton, who talks about the biology of belief, and I love him. He's a sweet man. Great information, great insight. He said something that I talk about, so I actually got better numbers from his specifics, because he's good with statistics, being a scientist. If you know what an iceberg is, basically, in terms of an iceberg sits in the ocean, and approximately 90-something% of it is below the surface, and about 5-10% of it is above the surface, because an iceberg is the hidden part. Hence the problem with the Titanic and other things too, where icebergs are deceptive. Well, our consciousness is the same. The way Bruce put it, he said that basically something like 95-96% of our consciousness is our subconscious, and 4-5% is our conscious mind. And the way he described it was, and I love this because he talks about how our conscious mind is our dreams, our visions, our intentions, what we wish for. Our subconscious mind is all our rules, have-tos, history, and beliefs. Now, the way I use it in my work is, the challenge is that we set intentions about relationships. So the Foggy Glasses piece, where you basically get a vision and clarity of what you want to create, that's great. However, if you don't deal with and make peace with and have some resolution with your iceberg below the surface, that's going to keep overriding your choices. And again, the iceberg being so much below the surface, that's a lot of power. So a conscious mind may be only 4 or 5%, and a subconscious mind is all the rest. That means that consciousness is being driven by this large chunk of energy that's tied to our beliefs, rules, and structures. That subconscious mind, unfortunately, was implanted around the age of 6.
Yeah.
Because we are raised, and this is the thing I've learned over the years, from the age of 0 to about 8, 9, or 10, we don't have really a conscious mind. We're a sponge taking in the world. So we learn from everything around us, our parents particularly, and other adults, teachers, our religious teachers, we're all these people. That's the way life looks. And when you're a 2-year-old, our parents are gods because they're big, they're tall, and they tell us what to do, and they take care of us. They feed us and nurture us and everything else, hopefully.
Yeah.
Because some parents, I understand, didn't do that. But the thing is, we get this history lesson, or I should say our life path, implanted in our consciousness by these learnings without any filter. And around the age of 8, 9, or 10, our conscious mind sort of becomes online because we have self-will and autonomy. We start thinking about things. That becomes the gatekeeper for the subconscious. So really from the age of 10 onwards, we have this gatekeeper that keeps us protected in a way, so we don't become a sponge for everything coming in, except for the things that are resonating what we already know. Then they go straight past the gatekeeper. So that iceberg is really this huge amount of beliefs, rules, and structures we carry inside of ourselves that are running like automatic pilot. And this is the challenge. Because in automatic pilot, we don't think about them. So we say, I'm going to go over here, but our subconscious mind is going over there. We end up going this way, not this way. And it's true in any part of life, not just relationships, in career, in financial areas, and all areas, but particularly in relationships, we will make choices based upon our unconscious mind. And I'm going to give you permanent personal examples, which I'll give you, of how amazingly accurate it is, but also how silly it looks looking back at it.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because it's akin to the concept that I talk about in the personal growth area of my business, which is finding your 0 point and going back to find that blueprint inside of you that was left inside of you from day one, that the world and everything, all the well-meaning people have masked over and taken you in in a different direction. And you look in the public eye, there's countless times where when when parents and when well-meaning people have supported what was inside of somebody, they are successful, even if they come from humble and terrible beginnings like Loretta Lynn and Oprah. Yes, for those of you millennials who don't know Loretta Lynn, go look her up. I've just completely dated both Barry and myself. Thank you very much. But no, I mean, but that's the whole or we'll bring it into today. Taylor Swift. There we go. Now this video will go to #1 everywhere.
There we go.
Because we'll put it in the
hashtags.
Yeah, just put hashtag Taylor Swift. But no, in all seriousness, it's when you have well-meaning people who support you and support the good things in your subconscious, you have a great path. When you don't, and they think they kind of know better than you, and they don't realize what's inside of you, it becomes a challenge. Now, when you work with people, do you find that same thing when looking at the iceberg and everything else, and when going back into their past? Do you kind of see the same thing, or do you see something different?
Well, let me first start off with my own story, just to give you some personal highlights on this, because it's part of that hero's journey. True. I mentioned at the beginning about how my parents had what I thought was a perfect relationship. Everything was working fine, no arguments, everything else. Well, that was the rule book I took out into my dating life. So I mentioned that in my teens and 20s when I dated, it would go for a few months, then we'd have an argument and I'd leave. That's because the rules I had been raised with, that iceberg, was that my parents never argued. Therefore, a relationship that works never had arguments, and I proved myself wrong every single time. So I had this broken belief that kept it was like playing foul in my relationships. It would actually disrupt my relationships every time. And the truth was, I missed out on make-up sex, which is one of the biggest upsets I probably look back on. But the truth is, I didn't have the realization and the awareness until much later that I can actually change the paradigm. And that's part of the work I do. Is the iceberg is not insurmountable, but you've got to acknowledge it. You can't ignore it. It's too big to ignore, basically. And the truth also with clients is that happens a lot for them too, where they're carrying this rule book around. They don't know they're carrying it. It's so ingrained in them, it's automatic pilot, and they're wondering why they have the same results. And when I do a little digging with them and look back at that life, they go, oh, hang on a second, that's what they did. I'm doing the same thing. And it's such an awareness, and that can change it just there. It is sometimes more work to do with healing there, because I've got a background with memory healing as well. But sometimes just the awareness can change everything.
Yeah, and sometimes it's, as they used to say, the 800-pound gorilla or the elephant in the room. It's in there, and if you don't acknowledge it's, I'll say it a little bit differently. If you got an 800-pound gorilla in the room or the iceberg behind you, and you don't not acknowledge its existence, if it's an 800-pound gorilla, guess what? You're going to be dinner tonight. And it's, it is what it is. And if it's the iceberg, you're going to be the Titanic. So speaking of broken things and speaking of things that can break, let's get into the broken mirror. And yeah, I
Nice
mean,
segue, yes.
I know a broken mirror means 7 years of bad luck, but when you say it can mean more than 7 years of bad luck, what are you really talking about here?
What I'm talking about is our self-image, looking in the mirror, because the joke about set broken mirrors is 7 years bad luck. Well, the truth is, if we do not look at ourselves and change our own self-perception, it will be the bad luck through our whole lives, way more than 7 years. So literally, because we will take a rule book, again, like the rules we grew up with, and reflect upon ourselves. If we look in the mirror and we don't understand, appreciate, love who we are, we're going to either, one, continue to look outside ourselves for finding that fulfillment, which will never fill us up like Chinese food. We'll be hungry again in 2 hours. It's the self-love that's going to carry us through, because part of the work I do with my clients is recognition of my own journey is finding fulfillment in who you are, so you're 100%. Because in the old model, back in the 50s, 60s, relationships were 50-50, very codependent. And in my work, I help my clients become interdependent. So that basically what we're doing is learning how to be 100% of who we are, fully fulfilled. So when we find a partnership, we find a partner who's also the same way, because relationships are 50-50, they're 100-100.
Yeah.
Because we're not missing pieces. We're not limping along with gaps. We are fulfilled. So we're a whole mirror, not a cracked mirror. So it's the learning that we are fulfilled in who we are. So that relationship is additive to who we are, not filling a gap we think we have.
Wow, that is so deep. So to put it and it's so deep and it's so great, and to kind of put it another way, it's almost like those it's like it's a difference between getting a window repair guy or getting a brand new windshield. And I'm going to give a mirror example in a second, but a lot of people think of relationships as kind of the window repair guy that comes out with the little resin that goes in the crack and seals it up to try and prevent it from breaking anymore. It's like instead of doing that, I mean, a relationship really isn't that. It's almost like getting a new window, or in the case of a mirror, it's like yeah, you can put glue. I'm going to say it differently. Correct me if I'm wrong. You break a mirror, you can glue the mirror back together, but you're still always going to see those cracked lines. The best thing to do is get a brand new mirror so you can see things differently. And is that kind of what you're talking about, or am I completely off base here?
The truth is that in my work, because I'm not using literal like the broken mirror type thing, the model is that once you become clear that the mirror isn't broken in the first place, but we've had this perception it was broken, that's the illusion. It's interesting because the whole crack thing brings up to there's a Japanese art of, and I forgot the name because of the K, but basically what they do is when they have broken pottery, they put gold in the seams to put it together, and they call it stronger at the broken places. And it's actually an art form in Japan. And this idea is that that's part of what we learn, is that when we learn that we aren't broken, then in fact we've grown strength and we've gained from who we are. It's like scar tissue is stronger than the original skin. So we learn that what we've learned through so when we're growing, we become more healthy, more strong, more powerful as we evolve. We're not less than, we're more than. And that means the mirror becomes clearer, so we see more clearly who we are. And that becomes much more inspiring and also less codependent. This thing about the codependence is something that I grew up with, and it's something my parents' generation was embracing. And I can read data cells to about Archie Bunker and All in the Family if you want to go back that far. You probably see Nickelodeon, but it was very, very politically. How can I say this? It wasn't politically correct back then in terms of looking at the language they used back then. But the truth was, it was a codependent model. It was the guy was about going getting the money, getting me home, and the wife was at home being the meek housewife. A lot of us were raised in that culture, so we still see life that way, and it's very codependent because they couldn't live without each other. And I'm so passionate because I've come through both the codependent, independent, now the interdependent generation as we're evolving into a place where we learn to give from overflow and have attractive relationships. So part of that lesson is that who we are is sufficient, who we are is complete, who we are is full when we take time to look at ourselves and acknowledge and remember who we really are. Those things that happen to us were lessons. They didn't destroy us.
Wow, and I love, and it was so deep when you had said, you realize that the mirror isn't broken to begin with. It's almost like it reminds me of The Matrix, where they're sitting there, where Neo is sitting there with the kid, and he's trying to bend the spoon, and the kid's like, there is no spoon. And it's kind of a weird thought to think about, but it's all about changing your mind and changing your perception.
Yeah,
because when
absolutely.
you don't, and if you don't, you're going to continue to have the same results. I mean, it's funny because a lot of people will tell you, hey, change your actions and you get different results. And it's like, well, to a point, but if you don't change your mind and change your perceptions, you're not, even if you change your actions, you're probably just going to do another bad action. Kind of like in
Absolutely.
relationships that you're talking about, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so it's, it's kind of like until you not fix the broken mirror, but until you realize the mirror isn't broken to begin with, and there's nothing wrong, so to speak, and until you
Hmm.
realize that what what you're presented with in front of you is a false vision. It's almost like a funhouse mirror. I mean, is that kind of a? I'm just trying to get different ways to say it because our audience loves kind of different things out there. So it's
Right.
almost like a funhouse mirror. It's like
Hmm.
you have a choice, but if there's 4 mirrors lined up and one makes you look skinny, one makes you look fat, one makes you look this, one makes you look that. You have the choice to go to each one of those mirrors, and you'll see what that mirror reflects. Is it the same thing with the broken mirror that you have a choice to either look at a broken mirror or a non-broken mirror and see what it reflects?
Well, the simplest way to put it is the distortion. And it's that distortion of our reality that we seem to think is the truth, and it's inaccurate. And so half the work is simply to become aware that we're not what we think we are. And we're not what we see in the mirror. That's the shift. So maybe a broken mirror would be better to say distorted mirror might be more accurate because it's not a broken mirror, but it's reflecting back to us what we think is the truth, and it's not the truth.
So
So it's that shift.
yeah, so it really is the funhouse mirror. It's like, if you're over, I mean, at one point I was 300 pounds, and I used to love to go to the funhouse and and look in the skinny mirror and go, hey, that's what's reality. Um, but until you realize that whatever you're looking at I think what you're saying is until you realize whatever you're looking at isn't, or at least doesn't have to be your reality,
Right.
then regardless of any other actions you take, you're going to get the same results, the same bad results over and over again, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, this has been epic. This has been, it's funny because well, I'll just keep saying epic because this has been great. I wish I would, I'm glad I met you now, Barry, because at least going forward, the next relationship I have, I won't be looking through a broken mirror, which is
Good.
good,
Good.
and I'll be able to get rid of, my next goal is to instead of having an iceberg behind me, I'm gonna chop it up into little bits and just have a little bit of floating ice that you can have. Floating ice, it's okay. I'm a big Deadliest Catch fan, so I mean, the floating ice is okay. When the big ice pack hits, it's not good.
Right.
Before we wrap up, and I'm going to wrap up with your call to action in a second. Before we
Hmm.
wrap up this episode of Expert Showcase, if there's one thing that you could leave our audience with, what would you say to them?
You are enough, and you can have what you want in a relationship. Have faith in that, and just do what you need to do to get there. It's definitely worth every step.
Epic. That is an epic thought to leave. Today we've been talking with Barry Selby, the Heartbreak Repair Specialist. In our first part, we talked about Barry's hero's journey, and you'll hear how he went through a lot of the same stuff you're probably going through now and why he is the perfect person to be the Heartbreak Repair Specialist. In this segment, we talked about his big focus, which is Foggy Glasses and Iceberg and Broken Mirror, 3 keys to stop playing Russian roulette with romance. So, oh, wait a minute. The funny part is, and everybody's going, wait a minute, Chris, you're supposed to give us a special offer. Yes, I am. And then, I've been so touched I was so getting engrossed in the moment and touched by everything Barry said. I almost went off the rails there for a second. So here's the spin. gotta love live TV. Here's the special offer. Here's what you want to do. You want to go out to barryselby.com/consult. The website is on the screen. Barry serves his clients to resolve all 3 areas in both the Romance Blueprint online program and in his private coaching practice. The great news is by going to this address you see on the screen right now, he's offering a complimentary romance discovery session as his gift to the viewers, which is epic, epic. Thank you, Barry. I'm probably going to take you up on that because goodness knows after the stuff I've been through, I could probably use it. And my next wife will thank you for it.
You're welcome.
I was going to say maybe I'll find my next wife first, and we'll see if we're a good fit. But anyway, that's a whole other topic for another show. Once again, head out to barryselby.com/consult. Take advantage of this epic free offer. Take advantage of this consultation. I know after you've seen this, if you haven't seen the whole episode, if you're just tuning in now, go back and watch the whole episode because I know after you see it, and you're going to understand why Barry is the Heartbreak Repair Specialist and why he's the one to help you take your life and your romance to the next level. So, Barry, thank you again for being an epic guest. To all our viewers, thank you for being epic viewers today. And until next time, make it an epic day.